We Saved You a Seat is sponsored by the Oklahoma Family Network. Oklahoma Family Network focuses on supporting families of children and youth with special health care needs and disabilities, as well as families who have children with a mental health or behavioral health diagnosis. Oklahoma Family Network provides families with emotional support, resource navigation, parent-to-parent engagement opportunities, and wants to ensure quality health care for all children and families by building strong and effective family-professional partnerships. The State Maternal Health Innovation Program is one of many complementary investments made to improve maternal health across the nation. Oklahoma's State Maternal Health Innovation Grant has partnered with Oklahoma Family Network to help improve maternal health by allowing OFN to share family stories of those touched personally by critical health outcomes during pregnancy or soon after giving birth. The power of educating others with true experiences can and will improve future maternal health outcomes for our community. Thank you to the families who share their experiences and allow maternal health leaders to learn from your journey. Thank you to the maternal health leaders for uniting and listening to stories of those impacted by difficult outcomes. Together, we unite to improve maternal health outcomes and experiences. Tell us who you are and just a quick summary of your family.
My name is Christine Cleary. A lot of my friends know me as Chrissy. I currently work as a social worker at the VA in our homeless program. I've worked in the past with kids in therapeutic foster care through the Bear Foundation and have done some counseling and therapy with folks at some other agencies. I've been married to my wonderful husband for 23 and a half years. We have 3 beautiful kiddos. I love Disney movies and happy endings and musicals and scrapbooking when I have time.
And babies, you love babies.
And gosh, I love babies. I can't sit in church without staring at other people's babies. It's a problem. Like I love life. Like I love watching like the older veterans I meet, who are nearing the end of their life and seeing, the fullness of it. And I love, little babies and seeing people with their little baby bumps that are pregnant. We go to church in Midwest City at St. Philip Neri Catholic Church, and I help with their St. Vincent de Paul Society. We take calls from people in the community who need help with like utilities and gas and water bills. And read at the church. My husband's been involved in ministry forever. I first became pregnant a couple months after getting married. So I was about 22 years old. And that was with our oldest kiddo, Joshua. And honestly, pregnancy could not have been a better experience. Like I was at my healthiest. I'm someone who has struggled with chronic migraines my entire life, and I didn't have a single migraine the whole time I was pregnant. My body kind of adjusted to pregnancy where like within the first month or 2, I got to what was a normal weight for pregnancy, struggled with the regular nausea and morning sickness that comes with pregnancy, but nothing that was terrible or awful. I felt like more energy, and my mental health was really great, just really excited about it, really happy. And, towards the end, obviously, the uncomfortability of being pregnant as you get bigger. I was in graduate school at the time for my social work degree. So traveling to school every day or doing my internships or anything like that was a little bit of a struggle. So I took a semester off of college just because it was my first kiddo and I didn't know what was going to happen. Had an incredibly long labor. Learned later on, I wanted to have a completely natural childbirth experience and didn't want to use medication or anything. Well, I'm someone who has always struggled with anxiety and also obsessive compulsive disorder. So I like to control everything. And so what I didn't realize at the time was that sometimes people who struggle with anxiety can't let their body relax enough in childbirth to dilate. So I was in labor for like 16 hours with no medication, didn't dilate at all. And finally, my contractions were like every, I don't know, 30 seconds apart. And it was just like excruciating pain. Like there's like the line where your contractions are supposed to be at their highest, and mine were like way above it. And the nurse just looked at me and said, "Girl, you're not progressing at all, and you're in awful pain. And I appreciate that you're trying to be a trooper, but your body's just not relaxing enough in between the contractions to let anything happen." So I went ahead and agreed to do the epidural. Now, this was at a time where, you weren't really free to kind of move about and make yourself comfortable. It was like you're laying in a bed and you're waiting for, your labor to progress. So I got the epidural and like was at a 2 when I got the epidural, and 2 hours later I was at a 10. I mean, it was just like, and then several hours later we delivered him, and everything was fine and perfect. Had the normal postpartum, dealing with post-labor pains, and body adjusted well, nursed him the first year. He was extremely healthy, very happy kid, and everything was fine. And then about a little less than a year and a half later, got pregnant again with my second child, Rebecca. She's a junior in college now. And that pregnancy was also great, felt super healthy. I did have more morning sickness with her, but with both her and Joshua, had no ankle swelling or anything like that. I kept seeing other people who had that and was just like, that's odd. Why are their ankles so big? Like I never understood it. Never had that. Was in graduate school finishing up my degree at the time. Was due in March and was set to graduate with my MSW in May. And really great pregnancy. Went into labor with her. Everything was fine. It was funny because with both her and my first, my body never figured out that I only had one kid. So I kept like producing enough milk for like all these kids. And they were these big, fat, squishy babies. They were so cute. And I could just like have them and then pump and put it aside for when my husband was taking care of the kiddos at home while I was at school or whatever. So, super healthy, great recovery, no problems, felt great. She was born the 1st of March, took a couple days off of classes. It was spring break afterwards, and then went back to class afterwards and finished up my degree and graduated in May. Everything was fine, super healthy, no major problems. And then we moved back to Oklahoma after I finished graduate school. Got pregnant a couple years later with our third, Andrew. And again, pregnancy was great, felt really healthy, felt really happy. No headaches, no major issues. Didn't even really have morning sickness with him. Toward the last like month and a half of my pregnancy, I noticed my feet were swelling a little bit, but they were like, okay, now you're older. By older, I was 27. So, because he was my third. But I was like, but this is unusual for me. My feet don't normally swell. And it was, the response was, everyone's feet swells. It's very odd that your feet didn't swell the first time. And for me, it was kind of like a flag, but they just kept saying it was normal. It was normal. All my labs were normal. All my tests were normal. I felt like my blood pressure was a little higher in that pregnancy. I'm someone who runs with a really low blood pressure. Like I've always been someone with super low blood pressure, struggle with dizziness and stuff. And my blood pressure toward the end of my pregnancy was like 120/80 the whole time. And they kept saying, "Oh, that's normal. That's perfect." And I was like, it's not normal for me though. And that go around, I had chosen a specific doctor and birthing center because I wanted to have like a more controlled environment that was less medical, and maybe I could move around a little more and things like that. And really had a great experience, but it was just kind of like there were little things that looking back now, I'm like, maybe that was a sign. So I went into labor with him a few weeks before my due date, which both of my other kids were a week or 2 weeks late. Like I always had to be induced to have them. With him, I just went into labor. We went up to the women's center, and there was a really bad snow and ice storm coming in, and they were just like, listen, with your history of not progressing, we don't want to call the doctor in and her be stuck here all night. We want to give you some, like a little something for the pain, and have you go back home and come back when you're a little more progressed. Well, we couldn't get back home because of the roads, and it was just this like huge snow and ice storm back in 2006. And so we ended up staying at my in-laws' house, trying to rest. Of course, couldn't rest. Had the two kids with us, the younger ones. The next morning, I was like, no, we got to go back in. Got to go back in. So went back to the women's center and told them, I was like, here's the deal. I won't dilate without an epidural. Let's go ahead and just do it. So my doctor came in and did the epidural. I was like at a 2 or a 3, but I had been in labor like all night. Felt fine, except, labor pains. And she gave me the epidural, and then like labor just started progressing. She gave me a little something to help labor progress a little more quickly because the storm was really bad. Like businesses were completely shut down. Like no one could get out anywhere. Like it was insane. And so when he started coming, they called and another doctor came in. She was really fantastic. Great experience with her, delivered him, normal delivery, everything was fine. And then afterwards, I remember feeling more tired, but I thought it was just because I had been up all night with a snow and ice storm, getting the kids where they needed to be, going back to my in-laws' house because of the storm, just kind of anxiety about the storm. I grew up in Florida. I don't like snow and ice. I'm not used to it. It makes me anxious. So, and then just thinking about my other kids and them getting to and from where they needed to go. So I remember being really tired, and I remember my back hurting really bad and feeling like my chest hurt, like right in the center of my chest. I just felt like it hurt. And they said, oh, you probably pushed too hard. Well, what's odd with all my deliveries is I never had to push. My contractions were strong enough that when they came, they just came. Like it wasn't even a push. And I was like, no, I definitely didn't strain anything pushing. Something else is going on. So they literally put the, those like cold packs they give you after you give birth for areas to heal. They like stuck those to my back and my chest, and they were like, oh, it'll just help ease the pain. And um but like we had to stay there for longer because I needed to be on antibiotic. And so I just kept saying, yeah, I don't feel right. Like I'm tired, my chest hurts, my back hurts, like something isn't right. And I feel really tired. And they're like, of course you're tired. You just had a baby and you've got 2 toddlers and that's normal. And then they started asking me some other questions. They were like, well, we see here on your chart that you have a anxiety diagnosis. Is it possible you're having a panic attack? And I was like, well, anything's possible. But normally, like this is prime time me, like me with babies and kids. Like this is when I'm at my happiest. Like I don't normally feel anxious about this kind of stuff. Like normally I'm just snuggling in and nursing a baby and like it's the best moment of my life. It's like, so they just kept saying, well, I think it's maybe a panic attack or anxiety, and I was like, okay, you're the nurses. Because it was a birthing center, a doctor wasn't there unless the nurses called her. And so I kept saying, well, my doctor knows me really well. Will you at least tell her what I'm saying? And they were kind of dismissive. And one of them I could tell was even just kind of annoyed. And I heard her on the phone with her going, she's just like really anxious and her back hurts. We think she strained something. We're gonna try to keep her calm or whatever. And it wasn't like I was being like over the top or, demanding. I was just like just not feeling well. And I couldn't sleep. Like I couldn't rest. Like that was what was weird is um normally when the baby sleeps, like I can sleep or even just hold them and rest. And I kept the one thing that I noticed was my feet kept swelling more. Like my feet just kept swelling more. And I was like, well, that's weird. Because normally as soon as the baby comes out and I start nursing, I'm like, shedding pounds or whatever. Um, and my feet were swelling. And I noticed like every time I laid down, I just was coughing and not feeling well. And I couldn't quite figure out that. And I had ice packs and heat packs. And I remember looking over at my husband, who was like peacefully sleeping in the world's most uncomfortable chair. And I was just like, why can't I sleep? Like, what is going on? Like, this is so weird. And so I asked one of the nurses to come in because I was like, I just feel really lightheaded. And they checked my blood pressure, like, blood pressure's great. It's 120/80. I was like, that's really high for me. Like, I'm a 90/60 gal. Like, that's really high for me. And they're like, no, no, this is great. And then I was like, does my heart rate say it's 46? I think it says it's 46, and I'm a high heart rate person. Like, I'm a 100 resting heart rate person, like always have been. And I was like, that's really high for me. I was like, can you call my doctor, or really low for me? Can you tell my doctor and tell her like my blood pressure's high and my heart rate's low, and about my feet? And again, the nurse was just kind of like, this is very normal. I think it's your anxiety. And I was like, well, just call her. And I heard her call her and tell her that my heart rate was high and my blood pressure was low. And I'm like, no, 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 that's not what it is. And she's like, I've got it, hun. And I'm like, that's not what it was. Well, I knew my doctor, like I've known her for a long time. We had been involved in some like community outreach and even spoken to a couple groups. And I was like, this is not going to fly with her. Um, and so I called in this other nurse who was a lot older. They were getting ready to discharge me. And I was like, something is just not right. I was like, my blood pressure's high. At that point, it was like 133/73. And I was like, my heart rate's low. This is not normal for me. And my feet are swelling. And if your feet are going to swell, and it's supposed to be during pregnancy, this has never happened before. I was like, my chest just like hurts. Like it just hurts. And she was like, yeah, they said they called your doctor and your doctor said it was okay and she'd be back by to visit you. And I was like, yeah, but what they told my doctor was wrong and they won't let me talk to her on my own. And it was still like the snow and ice storm and we were figuring out how we were going to get home. And I remember looking out the window and seeing people walking through the drive-through of McDonald's because no one could drive at that time. And I was just like, okay, this is weird. So the nurse was like, I'm going to teach you how to take your pulse and your blood pressure. And I just want you to pay attention because I really do feel like you're the best judge of your own body. She's like, but I'm not the charge nurse right now. And so she was like, you told me you've had anxiety your whole life. You know what an anxiety attack feels like. I hear you saying, like, she really heard me, but she wasn't the charge nurse. And so she taught me like how to take my blood pressure and my pulse and stuff. And she said, if anything else happens, just kind of let us know. And at that point, I was just like not feeling well. And I was like, well, maybe if I go home, I can just, see my other kids and I'll be happy and I'll rest. And so went home and, everyone had come in to visit and my family had come in from out of town to see me and the new baby. And I was just like, I just felt wiped. Like I was just tired, but I couldn't sleep. Like every time I laid down, I felt like I kept coughing, having this dry cough. And I thought, oh, I probably caught something at the hospital. And my feet kept swelling. And then I noticed like my neck was kind of swollen. And I was like, well, that's odd. But, I just kept like nursing him, thinking everything was just going to get better in a few days. And every night when I would lay down, like it got to where I couldn't lay back at all. Like I couldn't sleep. I felt like I was drowning. And I was like, and drowning is like my worst fear. So that was not fun. And so every night I would like try to sleep in between nursing. And the only time I had any physical relief was we have like a big bathtub in our bathroom. Was I would take like a bath and just get all the way down to like my chin. And it was like I felt like I could breathe when I was in the bath. And I was like, well, that's odd. And I would get up and do this at like 2 a.m. because I couldn't sleep. And I remember my husband being like, I mean, do whatever you need to do, but you know, most people don't want to go in the bath right after they have a baby. They're like, eh. But I was like, no, but I can breathe this way. So it was like day 11 after I had him, and I was like swollen. I felt like I looked like an Oompa Loompa. I was just like, this is ridiculous. I kept coughing. I was like, and it was like like 11th night, and I was like, that's it. If I'm having a panic attack, I'm going in to get some good meds because I need to sleep. I'm tired. I hadn't slept for more than like an hour in 11 days, like an hour at a time. I was like cleaning my house like I was nesting, which is odd right after you have a baby. Like normally that's right before, and just not able to relax at all. And so I got Andrew. He's our youngest, and I just leaned over and I told my husband, hey, I'm gonna go up to the hospital. Like, I need something stronger if this is anxiety because I just can't rest and I'm tired. I was like, I'll be back in a little bit. And this is before like urgent care was really like up and running. So like there was no idea that I could just like go to an urgent care. It was like 5:30 in the morning. So I loaded Andrew up in the car and I drove to the hospital and they brought me back and I walked in, I sat down with this nurse and I was like, okay, I know when I had him, they said I was having an anxiety attack. I was like, this is like the worst it's ever been. I can't sleep, I can't rest, I can't breathe. I like my chest is hurting, my back is hurting. I was like, I'm swelling. I'm not losing the baby weight like I normally do because normally it happens really fast. I was like, so can you give me like Prozac, Paxil, something strong because this is ridiculous. And the nurse just like looked at me and she looked down at the carrier at Andrew and she was like, honey, you're in heart failure. And I was like, what? She's like, you're in heart failure. Like I can tell it looking at you. She's like, your lungs are full of fluid, your heart's not beating the way it's supposed to be. She was like, where's your husband? And I was like, oh, I drove myself here. And she was like, you did what? And I said, I drove myself here. I was like, he's at home with the other kids. They've got to be at school in a couple hours. I was like, is there something you can give me for that? And she was like, no, no, we need to take you back. We need to get you checked. We need to see how progressed this is. She was like, we need to see how much fluid is on you. She's like, you need to call your husband and get him up here. And I was like, okay, well, we got kids that got to go to school. And she was like, you need to make arrangements for someone else to watch your kids. And I was like, no, nobody else watches our kids. It's just us. It's me. Like, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I'm living my best life, because I graduated from graduate school, but I decided to stay home with my kiddos, like during that time, just until they were old enough that they were all in school. And I felt like I had probably until I felt like I spent the time with them I wanted to. I think it was more about me and less about them. And so he got a hold of his parents and dropped off our older two and then met me up at the hospital. And when he came up there, they had just done an echocardiogram on me. I hadn't gotten the results yet. And they were doing a chest x-ray. And they were like, we're going to need to put a catheter in you. And I said, no, no, I don't like those. And they said, no, we're going to have to put a catheter in you to drain out all this fluid. And I was like, I've had 3 kids. I am a pro at peeing. I can go to the bathroom all the time. I can go carrying one of my babies. I can go nursing. You don't need to give me a catheter. And they're like, you have 44 pounds of fluid in your lungs. We need to get it out fast. And I was like, oh, okay. So they gave me a catheter, gave me an IV with Lasix and put an oxygen mask on me. And instantly I was like, I feel so much better. Do I get to go home at the end of this? And they were like, you're going to be here for a long time. And I was like, no, I have 2 kids. I've got dogs. I need to get home. I need to like, they're going to need help with homework. And they were like, no, you're going to be here a while. And when I remember when my husband came in, he just kind of like stood at the door and they were like, can you watch the baby? Because we're trying to do this. And she's still like nursing and everything. And then they took me into this room and they were like, okay, you're going to have to stop nursing. And I was like, for how long? And they were like, we're going to give you medicine that the baby can't have. And I think I must have just been so tired. I wasn't hearing anything they were saying because I was just like, well, but like at the end of today though, well, I still need to take the medicine. Like, well, I just have to like pump and dump. Like I wasn't really understanding. And they're like, no, you're going to be on medicine for a while. And I was like, but I have to nurse. I nursed my other 2 kids for a year. It's only been 11 days. Like he's only had 11 days of breast milk. He needs more. He won't be healthy. He won't be strong. And they were like, and I guess they pulled my husband aside and explained to him like the gravity of it because I wasn't hearing it. And they were like, if she didn't come in today, she probably wouldn't have been here tomorrow. Like she probably would have drowned or died in her sleep or her heart would have continued failing. And they came in and I was in a bed and I was feeling like a million times better. Like the fluid was coming out. They were changing out these catheter bags like every couple hours. They were just filling up like crazy. And I was like, and my ankles were getting smaller and I was like, this is a great weight loss plan, like trying to make jokes. And they were like, we got the results of your echocardiogram and your ejection fraction was 18%. And I was like, I don't know what an ejection fraction is. And they said, it's how effective your heart is at pumping, and yours is only at 18%. And I was like, oh, but you're giving me medicine for that, right? And they said, yeah, and we got to start this medicine right away. And so whenever you get done nursing, it's going to be like the last time you nurse. And I was like, and I still wasn't really hearing them. I was like, okay, well, can I pump until I'm done taking the medicine? And I wasn't being argumentative, but I was definitely being a little like just thick in that I wasn't hearing what they were saying. And somehow I convinced the nurse to agree to let me pump for 3 months, because I was convinced by the end of 3 months I would be fine and able to start breastfeeding again. Looking back, I now know that had I not pumped, I probably would have healed more quickly because it was putting a strain. This is before, the electronic double pumps that just kind of did everything for you. Um, and so they gave me, like I was getting injections in my stomach to keep from clotting because I wasn't allowed to get up and walk around. They gave me a medicine called Coreg, and this is before Coreg could be like this slow extended release. And so I was having to take it twice a day. And every time I took it, I just like crashed, like asleep for hours. Like it was just like, and the idea was that it was supposed to let your body rest so that your heart could heal. And then I was on diuretics to get the fluid off. And I remember a cardiologist came in, and he was very like pragmatic, and he was getting very annoyed with the fact that I was like, when am I going to be better? When am I going to get home? When am I going to take the kids to school? When can I start nursing again? And he just kind of like raised his voice at me and was like, childbirth is the most horrible thing a woman can go through because it leaches her body of everything she is. And you're lucky this didn't happen with your first kid. And I just started crying. And my doctor, who had been my OBGYN the whole time, had walked in behind him and was standing behind him. And he was kind of a little man and she was bigger. And she just screams, "Get out!" And he just turns on. He's like, "I'm telling her, I'm trying to help her understand the gravity of the situation. You will never have any more babies." And I was just like bawling at this point. She's like, "Get out!" And she's like, and she gets him out of the room, and I could hear her like yelling at him in the hallway. And I basically hear her say, "You've got to understand, all she has ever wanted is to have a big family and take care of them. And you're coming in here telling her like she can't do that. She can't even take care of the ones she has. And you're acting like you're lucky you had 3 kids, but to her, you've just taken away everything she's ever wanted." And she was such an advocate for me. And I found out later she found out they'd given her misinformation at the birthing center and not told her everything that was going on with me. And she was just heartbroken about it. And she just came in and she said, "We need to take care of you so you can take care of your babies. You've got 3 kids who need you and love you, and we need to make sure you're healthy enough to walk out of this hospital and be here to see them, graduate high school one day," or whatever. I don't remember exactly what she said. And she's like, "But you aren't going to be able to keep nursing. Like, you're just not going to be able to. We've got to get this medicine in you." And she was like, "If it's really important to you that you might be able to pick it up, if you get better, we can, hope that happens, pray that happens." But she's like, let's do it for 3 months and see what your heart gets up to. And we'll just keep testing it and checking it. And she got me with a different cardiologist who really like heard me, listened to me, validated to me that he understood why I was upset. And then they slowly brought people in who were like, "You've got to understand." They finally gave it a name. They said, "What you had was postpartum cardiac myopathy." They said some people are impacted during pregnancy. I had a little bit of a sign toward the very end, but nothing that would have set off any alarms anywhere. Um, and they said, it could have been caught there right after you had him, but for whatever reason, the weather, what was going on, who the staff was, it wasn't caught. They said, basically your heart just kind of failed, they didn't understand why it had happened, because they said there aren't a lot of cases of this. that we know of. We're just now starting to record cases. They shared with me there was another woman in Oklahoma who had had it that year, and she died kind of waiting on a heart transplant. They said, but basically what we're gonna do is just watch and give you medicine and help you heal, but there's probably a good chance you're not going to have any more kids, because it looks like for you, childbirth is what brought this on. And so, but the doctor was really validating. My doctor was really great. I had some, and I did start just feeling better with the oxygen. And my in-laws took care of our other two kiddos while I was in the hospital, so my husband could stay with me the whole time. And it was really important, if I couldn't nurse our son, that he could be there with me. So they stayed there. He stayed there with me that whole week. My parents flew back in from Florida to be with me. Um, and I remember waking up after finally sleeping well, and my husband being like at the side of the bed, just kneeling and praying over me, holding our baby, and the nurses in the hallway just watching, like, oh, like, and I remember just feeling like the best I had felt since I was pregnant. And then they said, we've been providing the formula for your son, but we realized you have no idea how to formula feed a baby. I was like, no, I don't. So they sent a nurse over from the birthing center to show me how to make a bottle of formula and to feed him a bottle. And it was the same nurse that had been really dismissive of me, really talked down to me. And I was like, nope, anybody else. And they were like, no, she needs to see this. She needs to see what was really wrong with you. And I was like, okay, teachable moment, fine. I'm into strength-based, approaches to things. So she showed me how to make a formula. She was very apologetic for dismissing the different signs. And my OB had a few choice words with her, and then she left. And then before I even left the hospital, they had these people come in, because the hospital oversees the birthing center. They had these people come in that were like from risk management. And they just started talking to me and bringing me papers. And they were like, we'd like to help you with this process. We recognize things didn't go smoothly. And I was just kind of in a fog. And I remember asking my dad to kind of talk to them. And I found out later it was like they were worried they were going to get sued or something. And and things were really tight. We were just living on my husband's salary as a youth minister, and we were on Sooner Care when we had him. But at the time, the state didn't completely cover epidural. So we were going to be on the hook for the cost of the epidural. And I knew that would take us years to pay off, just because we didn't have the funds. And they told me I wouldn't be able to work for a year, because I'd been doing some adjunct teaching at a college and earning a little bit of income. And so I remember before I left signing a paper that basically they would write off the epidural and give me like a few $100s, which is what I would have gotten paid for teaching. I wasn't getting paid very much at the time. And me feeling like I had really resolved something, but um but I said, I don't want this to happen to someone else. And so in the agreement, they agreed to start teaching post-birth nurses more about cardiomyopathy, recognizing the signs, listening to their patients, giving accurate information to the doctor. Because at birthing centers, it's not supposed to be as medical. Like, the doctor's only supposed to come in if there's something really wrong afterwards. And so they instituted this like nursing education program, and I was really happy with that. I felt like that was a good compromise. I definitely didn't understand what all I was signing, or that it would forever excuse them from whatever happened. Um, but it was just like such a weird time. And then I remember getting to leave and go home. I remember my older kids coming to visit, not understanding why all these tubes were on mommy and why she was hooked up to all these things and why she had to pee in a bag. Like they just didn't understand. And one of my daughter's biggest memories was she had like a dance recital at the time. And my family that was in from out of town had to take her to that dance recital, and I missed it. And she tells me to this day she remembers that I wasn't able to go, and missing me in the crowd. And it's just like, oh, broke my heart, you know. And she told me she remembers coming back wondering if I was still going to be there. And I was just like, all these things, you know, you experience it, but you don't think about what everyone else experiences. And my husband told me like multiple times, people are like, we don't know if she's going to make it. And she's fixated on the fact that she can't nurse her baby or have more kids. And we're going, we're just trying to get you out of here alive. So I got sent home with so many medications and still really frustrated I couldn't nurse. And still just hearing them say, you'll never have any more kids. And on this medication that every time I took it, I would just need to sleep for like 2 hours straight afterwards, and feeling like I couldn't do anything. Like I couldn't clean my house, I couldn't vacuum, I couldn't do laundry, I could sit and hold my kid, but I couldn't carry them, or I couldn't, you know, walk from point A to point B. And at this point, it's like really close to Christmas. We had put up the Christmas tree like right at the beginning of Advent, but because we were gone and out of the house and in the hospital, when we came home, the tree had fallen over the living room, and we hadn't done any shopping. And it was so important to me that I be a part of that. I remember my husband pulling up in front of a Walgreens and me like pushing the little cart through Walgreens. I'd never pushed a cart in Walgreens in my life. Like just trying to pick out candy or something, and going, this is what I can do. And I know I wasn't supposed to be walking around by myself. For months and months following, whenever I had to take a shower, I had to have like a baby monitor in there so that if something was wrong and I needed to call out, because I couldn't stand for too long. And if I sat too long, I had to get up and walk around, but I wasn't supposed to walk around by myself, because the medication, the way it worked. And so it was like several months of me feeling like I was just being babied and coddled. And then at following cardiology visits, the doctor explained to me, he said, you know, we've only had one other case like this in Oklahoma that we know of this year, and she didn't make it. And we're hoping that things get a lot better, but we're probably looking at a pacemaker or possibly a heart transplant down the line. And I was like, no, that's not going to happen. You know, I like to live in denial. I was like, no, that's not going to happen. Um, and I remember him saying, this disease, we're used to it hitting the African American population, people who are obese. And then there's another group of people who have been long-term heroin addicts. And I wasn't any of those things. And it was like, and it's only ever been a firstborn child. It's never been a second or third. He's like, we've never seen this. And so we don't know, you know, what we don't know. And we're trying to learn. And then since then, people started recognizing signs and learning that this is something that does happen. While it's not common, it's not completely uncommon. And if people can recognize the signs, they can, you know, maybe not stop it, but help treat it and recognize it so it doesn't get to the point. So you're not home for 11 days, you know, with lungs filling up with fluid or whatever. And so by the end of this year, by the end of that year, I had wonderful people coming in to help with like cleaning and meals, and people praying over me and just really wanting, you know, the best. People taking the kids out to do things because they didn't understand why mommy was just laying around. And by the end of that year, my ejection fraction was up to 30%. And then by the end of the next year, it was like up to 35%. And then by the end of like 7 years, it had gotten to like 50%. And they said most women, their heart at its highest functions between like 55, or like marathon runners might get to 60%. I thought, well, that's silly. Um, and so they said, if your heart, let's try to take you off these heart meds and see what happens. And if you can go off these heart meds and your heart can maintain at 50%, it might be able to regain strength on its own. And so they took me off the heart medication, and I was still getting regular echocardiograms and EKGs and EEGs and all that. Still having to wear heart monitor on and off, because I did have some episodes of like tachycardia, and they were just wanting to make sure that was okay. I was like, went off medication. I was off medication for a whole year, and it maintained at 50. And then the next year it was like between 50 and 55. And it's remained at that. I still have times where ever since then, my immune system is just garbage. Like I can get sick really easily. And if I get sick, it always turns into a sinus infection. Like my body just can't fight it off. Like that's something that's very different, because I used to be super healthy and I used to be able to exercise all the time and not get tired. And now it's like if I exercise, I can walk for like 10 minutes and my heart rate spikes to like 175 or something. And it's like, slow down, slow down. Like I'm not walking fast, I promise you. Um, and like each month during my cycle, when I menstruate, like I get really tired and my blood pressure gets really low and my heart rate kind of drops. And so I have to watch that. I'm not able to take any like cold and flu medicine. That's probably why when I get sick, it always like devolves into a sinus infection. Like even like the cold and flu medication that's for people with heart problems, like I can't take it. It messes with me. So I just have to be aware, and pay attention to signs. I don't have I don't have any of the major chest pain anymore. I don't have any of the swelling except what I do to myself as an older woman now. And I haven't had, to have a pacemaker or be on a transplant list or anything. I'm only 45, so I know that that's, something that might come down the pike, but the doctors are pretty confident that as long as I don't get pregnant again, that it shouldn't happen again. And they still aren't quite sure why it happened. They don't understand, but you know, it is what it is. And now my kids are 22, 20, and 18, and that kiddo that they didn't know if I was going to make it to see him graduate, he graduates in May, and he's going to college and wants to be on Broadway one day. It's just like,
He's gonna
okay.
get there. I have a feeling he's getting there. So
I know.
he's quite
So,
talented.
yeah.
Okay, so a couple of questions. So what are
Mhm.
some general ideas that you would say, you know what, moms out there, advocate for yourself in this way?
Yeah. I'm an avid document keeper. So I always kept all my records, and I knew what was normal for me and what wasn't normal for me. I'm I'm also a people pleaser. So if I advocate for myself and someone pushes back, I typically back down. This is one of those situations where you can't back down. If you know your feet do not swell in pregnancy, make them listen. If you know your blood pressure is high for you, make them listen. If you know that something feels off, and I never understood what that phrase make them listen before. Like for me, it's kind of like, well, I said something and they didn't listen. But it's like, no, this is my life. And I know that something's off. And it's also my insurance and my dime that's going to be paying for those medical bills. So if I tell you I want you to test something else, I need you to test something else. And if it's nothing, great. But it might be something. And so I think it's really good if you could show, hey, on my last pregnancy, this is what my blood pressure was the whole time. This is what my heart rate was the whole time. This is what my ankles look like. Um, this is really different. And I'm doing nothing different. It wasn't like with that pregnancy, I was suddenly working full time or laying around, or I wasn't doing anything different. It was the same. I think I needed to turn off the part of me that just keeps saying they're the expert, they know best, and allow myself to be the expert of myself and my body, and just be a little bit of a louder voice and advocate for myself. I think the other thing that's really important is having someone that you trust in your corner to listen to, because 3 months postpartum, I got a call from the cardiologist that I loved. Like, he had just been my biggest advocate. He was so wonderful. And he let me know, your sooner care has lapsed, and I don't take the insurance that you have through your husband's employer. And in fact, I haven't had, your insurance hasn't covered for like the last month. And he had been providing cardiac care for me the last like month and just writing it off. He was like, I know what you went through with your first cardiologist. I know you felt like he didn't hear you. I didn't want to make you change, but now that you're 3 months post and you're able to kind of be stable for a bit, because this is going to be your plan of treatment for the next year, let's get you to another doctor. And I remember the first doctor, like, it was just so unknown. I remember the first doctor I saw being hyper fixated on, what are we going to do to make sure you don't have more kids? And I was like, well, I've got that covered. Like, my husband and I have been, planning for our family naturally this whole time. Like, we know what we're doing. And she's like, no, 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 I need to put you on birth control. And I was like, you want to put someone with heart failure on birth control? Well, I don't know what else to do. And I was just like, well, what I'm telling you is, I know me, I know my body, and we have a plan for that. And I hear you when you say I can't get pregnant again, at least not right now. And we have a plan for that. And she was just so pushy and persistent, and she didn't listen to me. And she was like, well, I'm going to give you a prescription for birth control. You can do what you want, but whatever. And I was in my head, like, the educated person in me is going, I know all the statistics about this. I know how effective this is. And da, da, da. So we left, and I said, I got to get another cardiologist. And, that was like out of pocket cost for us I was like, I can't go to someone who doesn't listen to me. I went through that already. And then we went to another doctor, and they listened, and they were really great, but then they stopped taking our insurance. And so then I ended up finding another one who was absolutely fantastic and followed me for like several years. I mean, at least 10 years of a heart failure. And then he transitioned from being a normal practicing cardiologist to like an endovascular vein surgeon. And I remember being in the office, and they were changing like signage, and I was like, this is so weird. And him going, so you're my last patient. And I was like, it's like 11 o'clock in the morning. He's like, no, no, no. I mean, like, I'm not going to be a normal cardiologist anymore. I'm moving into this kind of practice. He was like, and I haven't had the heart to tell you. And, he had become someone that we really confided in, because he was a doctor who had a big family, and he knew me, and he knew what I wanted. And he really listened to me, and he was like, so I'm gonna have to transfer you to another cardiologist. And I was like, no. And that's been a process, because I do have to keep a cardiologist. I had an appointment 2 years ago where they said, okay, you're now 10 years off medication, still between 50 and 55%. So you're technically in remission from heart failure. And I'd never heard the phrase remission for heart failure, but I got transferred from a doctor who's had a ton of these kind of cases now, and knows a lot about it, and knows to look for signs. And so I'm at the point now where it's like, okay, you're going to go in every year to 2 years. They did a new battery of tests that had never been done before. In addition to advocating for what is going on with your body, I think it's important to advocate for a doctor you trust that is going to walk alongside you in this. You have the right to be picky. A cardiologist is going to be one of the most expensive doctors you ever have in your life. So it's okay for you to pick and choose. It's okay for you to get someone that, listens to you. And if I was a different person, I could have handled a no nonsense, no bedside manner doctor that just kind of shot it straight, but that's not who I am, and that's not what I needed.
Oklahoma Family Network would like to thank Chrissy for sharing her experiences surviving postpartum cardiomyopathy. Although her experience occurred years ago, you can hear the clarity and emotion expressed just as if it had occurred more recently. Understanding signs, symptoms, and treatment is important from a self-advocacy perspective as well as healthcare team member, and OFN is extremely grateful for the opportunity to bring awareness and focus to maternal health thanks to the Maternal Health Innovation Grant. If you or someone you know has experienced health complications or illnesses that occurred during or after pregnancy, childbirth, or the postpartum period, and you are ready to share your story for the purpose of awareness and education, OFN is ready to help. Thank you for listening in today. Thank you for listening to this episode of We Saved You a Seat. Oklahoma Family Network promotes family-centered care and provides tools so families can make informed decisions, advocate for improved services, build connections among families, and serve as a trusted resource in health care of children and young adults. If you would like to become a supporting family or get in touch with another family, please contact Oklahoma Family Network at oklahomafamilynetwork.org or by calling 405-271-5072.